Hi guys, I'm George, welcome to my YouTube channel, and today I'm here outside the Anya cafe on Pont Street, and I'm going to be doing a plein air painting of the Anya's Grotto, which is owned by Anya Hindmarch, who is a fashion designer and actually owns pretty much most of the shops on this street. So this is known colloquially as the Anya Village. So here I am right in the heart of it, and I don't think anyone really does Christmas better than Anya Hindmarch. And this grotto, it's sort of Christmas things, and downstairs is actually Father Christmas, so a whole sort of Christmas experience for children and families. I think it looks really nice with that red colour and the lights, so I'm going to set up and paint a plein air landscape of this scene. Remember, please subscribe and let's start painting.
I'm working in oil paint, and on my palette today I've got titanium white, cadmium yellow, yellow ochre, raw umber, cadmium red, carmine red, which is similar to alizarin crimson, and for my blues I've got dioxazine blue, which is quite a purplish blue, cobalt blue and ultramarine blue, and I've also got a little bit of ivory black, which I tend to use quite sparingly. And as I paint this street scene here on Pont Street, I'm going to be focusing on Anya's Christmas Grotto, as it's one of those locations that feels very specific to this time of year. It's festive, it's busy, and it's full of colour. And I want to try and capture not just the architecture, but also that seasonal atmosphere that you feel when you walk past. I start the painting by toning my linen canvas using raw umber mixed with dioxazine blue, and together they create a really nice neutral grey that's not too warm or too cool, and I find it gives me a good middle value to work from. It also immediately takes away the starkness of the white of the canvas, which makes judging values much easier right from the start. So slightly annoyingly, there's a van parked directly in front of Anya's Grotto whilst I'm working. So for now I'm sketching around it, looking carefully at the parts of the building I can still see, especially the upper sections, and I'm trying to mentally reconstruct what's missing. This is quite a common problem when painting on location, and often it's just the case of being patient, observing carefully, and filling in the gaps later. Perspective is really important in a painting like this. If the angles are wrong early on, it becomes very difficult to fix later. So to help this, I've sketched a loose grid on my canvas, dividing it into ninths. This allows me to check vertical and horizontal relationships across the scene, so I can see where things line up, how high or low different elements sit relative to one another, and it's a really useful tool for keeping the structure solid and accurate. Once I'm happy with the basic undersketch, I start by keying in some of the darkest areas of the scene. One of these is Anya Hindmarch's shop across the road, which has these dark black windows. I also paint in the dark window of Anya's Grotto itself, which I know is going to become one of the focal points of the painting. By placing these darks early on, I can begin to establish the value range of the painting, and everything else will relate back to these areas, so it helps anchor the whole scene. After that, I start massing in the lower section of the grotto, which is a slightly purplish red. It's cooler than the bright, warm reds of the sides and the top structure, and I want to make sure that the distinction is clear from the beginning. And this is where my carmine red comes in very handy. I'm not using pure carmine red out of the tube, as that would be a little bit too chromatic, but I am using mostly carmine red mixed with a bit of raw umber and a touch of my dioxazine blue, and also a touch of yellow ochre as well. I'm also mixing slightly different colour variations for areas that are catching more light. By adding a bit more cadmium yellow and a touch of titanium white and a touch more cadmium red, I can create warmer, lighter versions of the same base colour mix. And mixing these separate piles of paint for different planes is really important, as it allows you to return to those exact colours later on and maintain consistency across the painting. Also, for these ridges along the building, which are facing upwards and catching some of that light from the sky, I use a cooler, lighter colour mix by adding a bit of cobalt blue and titanium white to the base colour mix to get this nice purplish blue hue, as unlike the sun, the sky itself is a cool light source, so areas which are receiving light from the sky will be cooler in colour temperature. For the main window of the grotto, I use a brownish, yellowy green colour mix that I apply thinly so it has a slightly transparent feel, and this helps suggest the light behind the glass without making it too heavy too soon, and I will build into this later on with more layers and more variety. And as I paint these areas, I'm constantly checking the angles, the edges of the windows, the lines of the building, the slope of the pavement, as small inaccuracies here can throw off the whole scene, so I'm really taking my time. I'm also using quite a fine filbert brush which has a fine point, and the thing I like about the filbert brush is it has a sort of chisel shape head, and that way when turned on its side you can use it to create really nice fine lines, and also it's got a bit more of a rigid structure than your typical pointed round brush. So actually as I make these lines, the brush keeps its shape, helping me paint longer and crisper lines. Here I begin hinting at the lights inside the shop, and rather than painting them as isolated bright dots, I soften the surrounding area slightly, keeping it lighter so the light feels like it's glowing into the space around it. Now I move on to the building which is to the right of the grotto and further down the street, and I'm careful not to give it too much contrast or detail at this stage, as I do want this building to recede in the scene and not to be a distraction to the grotto. And at this stage I'm really just blocking in the big shapes with the approximate hue and tonal value, and I know I'll be coming back to these to rework these areas later on, so I'm not too precious about them at this stage. And the quicker I can get the whole scene roughly in place, the easier it becomes to analyse. Once the painting starts to resemble what I see in front of me, I can make much more informed decisions about which adjustments I need to make. One of the great things about oil paint is it is quite forgiving, as you can layer on top of what you've already painted, and having a solid base of the approximate colour allows you to go back in later on and refine things, add in subtle shifts in hue, temperature and chroma, as well as smaller details within the architecture and the lines of the bricks and things like that. Here I'm painting in the Christmas wreath in the window across the road, and this painting is really about Christmas for me, so I want to communicate this clearly, and the wreath is definitely a strong visual cue. And it's getting quite dark at this point as the sun sets very early during the winter months, and I find painting architecture always takes me a lot longer than if I was painting, say, a landscape which just had trees and nature in it, as you have to be a lot more specific. So here I take a break, and the Anya Cafe very kindly gave me a spiced hot chocolate, which is very much appreciated, and I definitely recommend, if you're in the area, paying a visit to the Anya Cafe. But you don't need to wait to see the resolution of this painting, as the video is going to keep on going. So I'm back at it, and I start by carving out some of the shapes and the pillars of the grotto using slightly darker red paint. For the shadows I'm not using black, I'm simply mixing a darker version of the red, keeping it within the same colour family. Underneath some of the decorative accents where the planes turn upwards and catch more light, I add lighter strokes of paint. And thinking about the planes and three-dimensional form is crucial here. It's this understanding of structure and light that makes the painting feel solid and believable. I then add the street sign Cadogan Lane, because I really want this painting to clearly place the viewer in London, and little details like this help anchor the scene and give it a sense of identity. Moving into the background buildings, I again sketch in the positions lightly before committing to detail, as if you commit to detail too early and things are misaligned, you're going to waste quite a lot of time having to correct this. One of the most enjoyable parts of this painting is adding the Christmas lights to the grotto, and I had been holding myself back a bit as I really wanted to get the structure and the important features in first, but this is something that I really enjoy doing, so I paint a soft halo first, then place a bold, high-key dab of paint using a mix of titanium white with a touch of cadmium yellow to make the white have a warm glow, and the contrast really makes the lights pop and feel luminous. I also observe how these lights are affecting the surrounding surfaces. For example, the board above the shop catches some warm light, so I highlight it with a slightly warmer, lighter red-orange mix. Next I move on to the road. I mix a purplish grey using ultramarine blue, titanium white, raw umber with a small touch of yellow ochre, carmine red and dioxazine blue, and I adjust this gradually until the value and hue feel right. And as I paint the road, I vary my brush strokes and subtly shift the colour by touching my brush into some of the different paints and mixing this into that base colour mix on my palette. And the goal is to keep the value fairly consistent while introducing gentle variation to the surface and the hue to make certain that it doesn't feel flat. For the pavement, I start by painting in the lines between the paving stones. This helps me establish the correct angles before filling in the stones themselves. Each stone has a slightly different hue, some lean more yellow, some more green, others towards pink or orange, but the values stay quite close. I'm careful not to overdo the chroma either, as it's the subtle variation that adds interest without drawing too much attention. I'm now working on the lettering on the side of the grotto with the words Special Edition, and this is one of those details that can easily go wrong if you try and rush it. So I slow down here and really pay close attention to painting each letter very carefully, directly with a small fine pointed brush. And one thing I have done before painting all the letters is I start by placing the first letter of each word. That way I can work out how much space I need for the smaller letters which follow. I can also make certain that the positioning of these words will look right in the painting. And once this is in place, I then go in with a lighter golden mix using titanium white and yellow ochre, and I just dab in a few sections where the light and some of these Christmas lights surrounding them are just catching the light on the letters and giving it a sort of golden shimmer. Here I'm painting a small figure walking past the shop in the background, and to paint them I don't think too much about the detail to start with. I just try and paint in the main shape and value and get the right gesture of the person walking. And I block them in with a simple mid-tone, and to help distinguish her from the background I add in a few highlights around the sort of edge of the form where the light from the sky above is catching her hair, and also on her coat around her sort of shoulder I paint a little highlight in here, and I also add a handbag to this figure as well. Here I'm writing Anya Hindmarch onto the shop in the background, and because the lettering is so small I sketched in first with a pencil, and this makes it much easier to paint over it accurately with a fine brush. And throughout the duration of the painting and across the different days, the light has changed a bit, although the buildings in the foreground have remained in shadow, but the tall buildings on the right, they have received a bit of sunlight when the sun breaks through the clouds, and today the sky is quite blue and there's sunlight catching the tops of the buildings. So I paint this by layering lighter paint over the brickwork, showing where the sun hits it. I also add a bit of blue sky. Even though the weather has changed quite a bit, I feel it complements the sunlight on the roofs and helps lift the atmosphere of the painting. Now returning to the main window of the grotto, the focal point, I add these boxes of merchandise behind the glass, mostly light shapes that break up the dark interior. I also add more lights to really push the Christmas atmosphere. And finally I decide to add a figure walking down the street. As Pont Street is always busy, and adding a person introduces movement and life to the scene. It also helps create scale and shows just how tall these buildings really are. And there's also a compositional reason for the figure. The arrow painted on the road could easily lead the viewers out of the painting, so by placing a figure walking inward, her movement draws the eye back into the centre of the scene and helps the viewer stay within the painting. And at this point there's a bit more writing I could add to the window, but it becomes very difficult to paint to this scale, and I feel I've done enough to suggest it without overworking the area. And with that I bring the painting to a close, and I hope this captures something of the Christmas spirit here on Pont Street, the lights, the colour and that particular atmosphere that you only get at this time of the year.
Hi guys, I hope you enjoyed that video of me painting here outside the Anya Cafe, doing the painting of Anya's grotto. It's been really fun, a little bit cold, but everyone's been really nice, and the Anya Cafe has taken care of me with lots of nice hot chocolates. If you enjoyed that video, please do subscribe to my YouTube channel, and I wish you a very Merry Christmas.